good to hear that. It's an oldie but a goodie song there. And I just realized, Cole, that I don't have the clicker up here. You can bring it up when you get a chance. But it is awesome to be together. We're excited for our series through John. If you're here new, visiting today, we've been going through the book of John and just really growing and getting to know Jesus in a special way. And, there's a lot of needs that we have. And, in the last week, I don't know what's come across your world, but there's been a lot of things that are happening right here, even among us and also outside. There's 3 from among us that woke up this morning in the Middle East. And I'm not exactly sure what country, if they're in Jordan or Dubai or they're in Jordan. But they woke up, and I'm sure that once they got awake, that they felt their need for God. Yeah. That they felt like, hey, we're in a world, in a part of the world that doesn't know much about Jesus. And what they do know is very skewed. Even in the fellowship today, I talked to a sister who thought that she had cancer this week. And so for a lot of the week, she was praying. And then she found out later on in the week that it was a false positive. So that was pretty encouraging. We're grateful for her. There's families in Tennessee this week that are waking up today, disturbed, wondering what's going on, that their kids who have served their country are no more. That was 1 week. Imagine what it's like from God's perspective. Imagine Jesus, every day he woke up, he went out into the world, and he felt and overcame and was aware of all the things that were going on. That took a lot of faith. Last week we talked about him going into this pool in Bethsaida and healing a man who had been crippled for 38 years. And bam, his life was changed. One day can change your entire life. He taught after that because it wasn't just about the healing physically, but it was about the spiritual healing that happened. And he talked about who he was, that he came from God, that if you reject Jesus, that you're rejecting God. And that was his message, and he repeated it over and over and over in just about every chapter in John. There was no mistaking who he was through the testimony of John the Baptist, through the miracles that he performed, through God's voice directly coming down, and Moses' testimony about him in the Scriptures. Thank you. But Jesus wanted to make sure that everybody had an opportunity. And in between John chapter 5 and chapter 6, that each writer doesn't record every single thing that Jesus did. But in between those 2 chapters, he sent out his 12 disciples and gave them authority to drive out demons and do miracles. So they got to actually do the things that Jesus did. They got to drive out demons. They got to heal people. Imagine what that would be like to feel as inadequate as we feel and then be able to heal someone. And know that God is using you. See, God, he just didn't want to come down and do all these things, but he wanted them to be involved. That would be pretty challenging to be humble after that. And in between chapter 5 and chapter 6, John the Baptist was killed for challenging Herod, Jesus' cousin and the man who prepared the way for him. And that kind of sets the stage of this chapter as he goes out to be with the disciples, to be alone. He's really trying to go on a retreat. He's aware of his need for God because of the situations in his life. And he ends up with the amazing story that many of us are familiar with, the feeding of the 5,000. And we have a picture here. My point number 1 is bread and fish. Yeah. Bread and fish. And, he talked about 5 loaves and 2 fish. And last week we got a chance to We got a chance to come up with 2 fish of our own here. And they weren't exactly the little fish that Jesus was using. But I learned a lot of lessons from these 2 fish. As I pray that today you learn a lot of lessons from the bread and the fish that Jesus used. But we went out to catch for these fish, and our professional guide did not want to go. He's up in Oregon. We went on a family reunion there, and he hasn't gone fishing for these steelhead, which are, anyway, you can look up what the steelhead are, but they're trout that go to the ocean and they come back. And he has not fished for them all year because they weren't there. That was it. Those were his words. You know, they count the fish as they come over the dams. And he said, you know, there was 10 times less fish coming over in from the Pacific, and we're like 100 miles inland. So there's no fish here. And so we went through, and so he took us to the exact right place where the fish would be if they're there. And we, you know, had to twitch our lines and everything and do all these exactly the way he told us how to do it. So it was almost like he was fishing through us, so we weren't all that great fishermen. He took us to the fish. He put the fly on the pole. He took the pole and he said, "Okay, do this." And so we did this for like a long time as he rowed back and forth on this river. You know, so he's doing all this work and we're just sitting there doing this, and all of a sudden we catch a fish, and oh my gosh, and you know, it starts jumping out of the water, and the whole time I'm thinking as the fish is on there, man, I hope this thing doesn't get off. You know, so there's that excitement and fear, and I didn't really set the hook too well, and I'm wondering if this is going to come off, and it was going to become the fish that got away story. And so you get it in there, and you get it, you know, when you finally get it in the net, that's when you're excited, because it's in. You know, but I learned a lot about fishing that week. That God's the one that makes the fish bite. That he gives us a role in it. We have to do all the right things, listen to the guide, and twitch the thing in the right way, and reel him in. And when he, you know, it was almost comical. He would tell me when to reel and when not to reel. Okay, don't reel. Okay, I won't reel. Okay, reel. Okay, I reel. Okay, don't reel. Okay, I won't reel. So I was a part of the process, and Connor was a part of the process. If you notice, his fish is a little bigger than mine. Partly it's because he's holding it up the different way, and mine's a little bit down, but it was bigger too, even when you hold it the right way. He was liking that. But that's kind of what we do. We're called to fish for men.
Right.
You might look out and you go, man, there's nothing out there. You know, survey says no one's open. But our guide still says that you got to keep fishing.
Right.
That's kind of monotonous. You ever done that for like 2 hours?
Right.
And if you do it too fast or too slow, then you're just wasting your time, because that's not going to work. So you have to do it. You know, God wants us to keep fishing.
Amen.
That there's big fish out there. You know, Danny's talking about business owners and leaders and people here in the desert, friends, family. You know, there's a way that we're supposed to set the hook and reel, and when not to reel, and when to challenge people, and when to encourage them, and pray and pray and pray. But God brings in the fish.
Amen.
You know, the coolest part of the whole day was at the end, and we got back. The second coolest was showing everybody the fish, but the first coolest was the guide's version of what happened. He said, you know what? There was someone upstairs. He's not a real spiritual guy, but he said there was someone upstairs looking out for us today. Because not only did he catch 0 fish, which he had caught so far, but we caught 2 in like 2 hours. And it was God. You know, I pray that this summer that we're out, we're catching fish. That we're out there, even whatever we feel about people are open. Fish are there. And ultimately, after we do all of our hard work and love and prayer and calls, that we realize that God's the one that catches the fish.
Amen.
We can do all of our stuff, but if he doesn't make them bite, then we're done. He's the only one that can do that. So let's start with a prayer before we dive into our text here. God, we thank you so much for the lessons that you give us through simple things like catching fish, like being together here today. God, I pray that this will be a life-changing time for us. God, that we won't leave here the same as we walked in, that we'll see you. I pray that you encourage us where we need to be encouraged. I pray that you challenge us where we need to be challenged. Lift us up, God. Help us to be more in love with Jesus when we walk out than when we walk in. God, get me out of the way so that you can speak through me. We pray in Jesus' name. Amen. In John chapter 6 and verse 1,
Go, Scott.
it says, sometime after this, Jesus crossed to the far side shore of the Sea of Galilee. And a great crowd of people followed him because they saw the signs he had performed by healing the sick. Jesus went up on a mountainside and sat down with the disciples. The Jewish Passover festival was near. When Jesus looked up and saw a great crowd coming towards him, he said to Philip, "Where should we buy bread for these people to eat?" He only asked him to test him, for he already had in mind what he was going to do. Philip answered him, "It would take more than a year and a half wages, more than a half a year's wages to buy enough bread for each one to have even a bite." Another of the disciples spoke up, Andrew, Simon Peter's brother. "Here is a boy with 5 small barley loaves and 2 small fish, but how far will they go among so many?" Jesus said, "Have the people sit down." There was plenty of grass in that place, and they sat down. About 5,000 men were there. So bread and fish. Jesus asked them an impossible question. How are we going to feed all of these people? And remember, Jesus went out here to get away with God, to go on a retreat. He was mourning. And when you read Matthew's account, it said that he had compassion on these people because they were harassed and helpless, like sheep without a shepherd. As we heard at communion, he put other people's needs first. Even when he needed God almost the most up until this point in his life, he put their needs first. But he asked them an impossible question, even though he knew what was going to happen. You know, you ever feel like God has put you in an impossible situation, that you don't know what the solution is, that you're stuck and you're challenged? One of our sisters was there this week when she thought she had cancer. She was in an impossible situation where she didn't have the solution. She didn't know what was going to happen. But Jesus did that to test them, to see where their faith was at. You know, God does this in our lives over and over and over. Why? Because we're like Philip and Andrew, who want to have everything figured out. We want to have it all set up, and I would be that guy that would be like, okay, let me count. We have one group of 50 and another group of 50 and another, and you just keep counting them, and you go, well, that's 10,000 people, and wow, we're not even close to doing this. That is me in our sinful nature, and that is us as humans in our sinful nature. We want to be in control. We want to figure it out. That's why Jesus said to be a disciple, you have to deny yourself. That means put whatever we think on the side and go with what God thinks. And I can imagine Jesus just sitting there as they went through this entire exercise. And now they're not looking to him, they're looking and they're trying to figure it all out themselves. And that's kind of God as he watches us in those impossible situations until we finally realize, you know what? If God doesn't move, I'm sunk. And we talked about that with the guys, about being humble this week and seeing our need for God. And at that point, they saw their need for God. Today, do you see your need for God? Do you feel like you're in control of your life? And you got it all together, and your things are going great, and you got a plan, and you got this, and I go, wow, that's scary. Because when we get so much in that mode, we don't leave room for God. And that time will come when we will be in that impossible situation. And my challenge to you is, will you look to Jesus, or will you look to yourself? Will you look to Him for solutions? It says they found 5 small fish, and it almost makes it seem like Andrew is a pretty spiritual guy. He said, well, what about this guy? This boy has 2 fish and 5 loaves. When you read the other account, actually Jesus asked him, what do you have? So it wasn't even him volunteering with his faith. He was just answering Jesus' question. And him knowing that's enough. You may feel like you're inadequate, but with God, it's more than enough. You know, I couldn't help but think about our preteens this week. As we sent them off to camp. Imagine one of these 12 or 20 or however many there are, 25, being the solution to all of our problems. They're going to fix your life. That's what happened, wasn't it? The little boy. He fixed him. He was prepared. Jesus looked to him and says, you know what? This boy has enough faith that he can do it. And, you know, I'm so proud of our kids. And I pray that we see them the way God sees them. That we invest in their faith. Even as they're coming back from camp, that we build on that. That we have the conversations and the quiet times and the fun and the connections. Amen. You know, they came back because they got fellowship and they heard the Word of God and they got inspired. You know, I'm sure that boy at the end of this day was inspired. You know, let's continue on. It says, Jesus took the loaves, gave thanks, and distributed to those who were seated as much as they wanted. He did the same with the fish. When they had enough to eat, he said to his disciples, gather the pieces that are left over, let nothing be wasted. So they gathered them and filled the 12 baskets with the pieces of the 5 barley loaves left over by those who had eaten. You know, it's amazing that some of the commentaries that I was reading, barley loaves were not exactly the richest of fare. People didn't get excited about barley loaves. It was actually what they used to feed the horses and the donkeys. You know, so here Jesus is providing this meal, and it's a pretty humble meal. It's not that special. He's meeting their needs, but he's encouraging them, and he's meeting their needs because as they're seeking after him. And it says that everyone was satisfied. I mean, imagine 10,000 people who were hungry that were satisfied. And the disciples picked up all the baskets, and it wasn't a coincidence that they had 12 baskets. And each disciple got to hold their own reminder of what happened. We started with 5, and I have more than 5 right here. And everyone is filled. And I'm sure there was an amazing celebration. This is the best place ever. There's no place where I'd want to be. I'm so glad I'm here. I almost didn't come. I almost didn't want to come up to this hill with Jesus this weekend. I almost didn't want to come to church today. I almost didn't want to read my Bible. I didn't want to go to camp. I didn't want to do this. There was a time in my life when I just felt like giving up, but I'm so glad I'm here. And they had one of those moments. Why would I ever go anywhere else? Why would I ever look to myself again? I can't believe I was trying to figure out how to feed all these people. Man, I am stupid. Spiritually stupid. You ever had those moments?
Come on, Scott.
They don't happen every day. But don't forget when they happen. It was a celebration. After the people saw the sign Jesus performed, they began to say, "Surely this is the prophet who had come into the world." But Jesus, knowing they intended to make him king by force, withdrew again to a mountain by himself. They were so fired up, but they still didn't want Jesus for who he was. They wanted their own Jesus. They wanted the Jesus that was going to give them what they wanted. And they wanted the power. And they wanted to kick these Romans out of here. And they wanted to be strong. And Jesus said, you got to die to be strong. But that wasn't good enough for them. And so Jesus slipped away off by himself to a mountain. Remember, he's feeling he needs to get some time with God after his cousin's dead. So he goes up on the mountain. He sends the disciples across the lake. But they never forgot that Jesus has got the answer in impossible situations. Whatever situation you're in, be grateful for those impossible situations. Because it gives you a chance to not figure out everything, but to look to God. That impossible situation is your opportunity to trust God with your life. To have evidence that you're not all that you think you are. But God is way more than you thought he was. And that's what they left with on that day and afternoon. Point number 2. They had a halftime boat ride, and I had to call it that because I'm kind of getting excited for football season. I don't know if you guys, it's still kind of a ways away. But we're starting practice tomorrow, Connor and I, at my house. So if you want to come by, you can practice. We're going to run a mile. We're going to run some sprints. We're going to do some different things. And I'm getting excited. I'm not going to be doing all the running, so I would be excited, but hopefully Connor is excited too. I know that Diego's been at practice lately too, so that's been fun to hear all of his stories. He's working out and doing different things. But really, they had this miraculous, back to the story here. They had this miraculous feeding. And then they have this boat ride, and then they go back on the other side, and then they have this extremely challenging teaching about the same concept that happened over here. So he did the miraculous feeding over here, and then he went across the lake, and then he taught about what he was really talking about. And what was more important than the food was the spiritual lesson. But in between, he had this boat ride. I mean, I'm just reading this chapter, just getting so tired. I'm just like, this is one day. I mean, he healed all these people when he wanted a break. Then he stayed up all night. And then he walked across the lake. And then he taught his disciples, rebuked his disciples. Then he went across on the other side. And then all the people are waiting for him over there. I'm going, man, I'm tired. But he went across, and it wasn't the exact boat ride that we would think. When I think of a boat ride, this is the kind of boat ride I'd like to go on. You know, Lake Powell, you know, the nice houseboat with the slide where you can go in. And I mean, that sounds fun. I mean, let's have a church boat trip on one of those, right? That wasn't exactly the church boat trip that he was going on right here. And let's read in verse 16. It said, when evening came, his disciples went down to the lake, where they got in the boat and set off across the lake for Capernaum. By now it was dark, and Jesus had not yet joined them. A strong wind was blowing, and the waters grew rough. When they had rowed about 3 or 4 miles, they saw Jesus approaching the boat, walking on the water. And they were frightened. That's an understatement. But he said to them, "It is I, don't be afraid." Then they were willing to take him into the boat. He had to kind of beg him to take him in. And immediately the boat reached the shore where they were headed. You know, the first time they went through the storm in the boat, Jesus was with them. He was sleeping underneath, and they woke him up and everything. And this time, they were growing, and so Jesus wasn't there with them. He sent them across into this storm that was coming, knowing that he was going to be there to help them, but he wasn't right as close as he was before. You know, you could see what's coming here. So they're rowing, they're experienced boatsmen rowing for 6 to 8 hours, and they've only gone 3 miles. I mean, 12 guys rowing for 8 hours, and you've only gone 3. That's pretty bad. I mean, you ever done the rowing machine at the, you know, at the gym, those erg machines? Anybody ever done those? I mean, you know, you could go pretty far. I mean, you could do a mile in, I don't know, 10 minutes. So 8 hours later, they're still straining at the oars. They had the whole experience where Peter comes out, walks on the water, falls down. Jesus picks him up, and he doesn't encourage him because he was the bravest and most faithful disciple. He challenges him because he just didn't have enough faith. You go, wow, even the best disciple, he's getting challenged. So the other guy's going, man, what am I? I didn't even have enough faith to get out of the boat. It's kind of like last chapter, the guy that said, oh, these are all the reasons why I'm not better. And Jesus said, just get up.
Right.
You know, so many of us were out there with all the reasons why we're not better and why we're not following God and why we're not committed and why we don't have faith. And Jesus is like, stop it. Have faith.
Right.
It's me. I don't want to hear about it. You know, there's times when our kids, they just kind of go on and on. Sorry, Connor. But you just go on and on and on. And there's a time you're just like, I'm done. I don't want to hear about all the reasons why you didn't do this. I told you like 12 times. That's bad parenting, by the way. But we do it. You know, there's so many of us that just sit there and we have all these reasons why we're not doing what we're supposed to be doing and why our quiet times are terrible and why we're not having our discipling times and why we're not reaching out. Just stop it.
All right. Come on.
Have faith. Jesus loves you, but he doesn't want to hear all about it every time. And that was the case. And I love the end where he says, when Jesus got in the boat, they immediately made it to the other side. I mean, they're fighting for hours, and then he gets in and they're there. I don't know how that happened, if it was like a speedboat and all of a sudden, or the wind died. I don't know what it was. But when things get challenging, do you blame God? Do you get an attitude when you're on that boat and you're rowing for hours and you're just like, what the heck am I doing here? I hate this boat. I hate this wind. I hate this guy next to me. And guess who sent us on this trip? Jesus. And so I hate him too. And yet that can be us in our Christian life.
Yeah. Come on.
Rowing away and you don't not going anywhere and just keep rowing and okay, God, what do you want me to do? Keep rowing. Okay. Now what, God? Keep rowing. Okay. You know, I had a track coach that always used to say, you know, the start of the race is always very easy. You're all excited and you're energetic and you're going and everybody's there and it's cheering and you know, the end of the race is easy too, right? Because you see the finish line, it's just right there, just like, okay, finally. But the middle part, that's the challenge. When you're far away from the start and you can't see the finish, and that's where we live. Most of us aren't close to our finish. We're in the middle. We're rowing. We don't know where we're going. We're just, God, I hope we're going in the right direction. I'm just going to keep going. And yet, will you trust God when it gets hard? Will you keep persevering until you see Jesus? You know, when you read one of the other Gospels, Jesus almost walked right by him. He was right there, but they missed him. You know, when we're rowing, we get so into whatever we're doing that we're not seeing Jesus right there. Once we get close to him, our problems don't go away, but they're a lot easier. And it says they just made it to the shore. Amazing miracles. Will you persevere when Jesus sends you on the boat and when he's not close at hand? That was a heck of a boat ride. Wow. Imagine when you get to the shore. Wow, what a day. We just 10,000 people ate on this boy's basket, and now we just saw Jesus walk on the water, man. This was incredible. God, you are awesome. I'm so glad I'm here. Man, I am so, where else would I ever want to be? And then you get to the beach, and you have another day with Jesus. I pray that you feel that way. There's no place I'd rather be. Man, this is it. It says, point number 3, I got to close out here. I don't know how I'm going to do this, but we're going to give it a shot. Bread of life. This was really the point of why Jesus fed all those people. It says the next day the crowd was there who had stayed on the opposite shore of the lake realized that only one boat had been there, and Jesus had not entered it with his disciples, but they had gone away alone. Then some boats from Tiberias landed near the place where the people were eating the bread after the Lord had given thanks. Once the crowd realized that neither Jesus nor his disciples were there, they got into the boats and went to Capernaum in search of Jesus. Right? That's a noble cause. They're in the search of Jesus. If Jesus isn't here, we're going to go find him. In verse 25, it says, when they found him on the other side of the lake, they asked him, Rabbi, when did you get here? Jesus answered, very truly, I tell you, you were looking for me not because you saw the signs I performed, but because you ate the loaves and had your fill. Do not work for food that spoils, but for food that endures to eternal life, which the Son of Man will give you. For on him God the Father has placed his seal of approval. Then they asked him, what must we do to do the works God requires? Don't work for food that spoils. That's Jesus' whole point. Work for food that leads to eternal life.
Amen.
Be spiritual. Don't go after this world. It's so temporary. Said Jesus answered, the work of God is this, to believe in the one he has sent. So they asked him, what sign will you give that we may see it and believe you? What will you do? Our ancestors ate manna in the wilderness, as it is written. He gave them bread from heaven to eat. Jesus said to them, very truly I tell you, it is not Moses who has given you the bread from heaven, but it is my Father who gives you the true bread from heaven. For the bread of God is the bread that comes down from heaven and gives life to the world. Verse, keep going. Sir, always give us this bread. Then Jesus declared, I am the bread of life. Whoever comes to me will never be hungry, and whoever believes in me will never be thirsty. But as I told you, you still have seen me, and yet you still do not believe. All those who the Father gives me will come to me, and whoever comes to me I will never drive away. For I have come down from heaven not to do my will, but to do the will of him who sent me. He says it again. I am the bread of life. Look to me and you'll never be hungry. Believe in me. Not just in your head, but trust me and obey my words. And you will have eternal life. He says that like 5 times in this chapter. Believe in me and you will have life. Don't believe in me and you won't have life. He keeps it simple for us. You know, he goes on to talk about some really challenging things. And I'm going to encourage you to read the rest of this chapter on your own in your own time, because there's a lot here. But who do you look to have life? Do you look to yourselves? Do you look to your own accomplishments? Do you look to your relationships, and when they're going well, then you feel good, and when they're not going well, then you don't feel good? Do you look to your health for security, or do you look to Jesus? Is there anything that could take you away from your walk with God? That's kind of what Jesus is saying here. Don't worry about food. Yeah, you had a good lunch yesterday. So what? I'm talking about eternity. And all you care about is whatever problem you walked in the door with. You know, by the end of the time with Jesus, they left. They didn't think about all the things that they were worried about when they first walked in. Not that they're not important to God, but ultimately they're not most important. The things that we worry about can be so trivial. He goes on and he says that God is the one who gives us true faith. He says, I am the bread of life. Your ancestors ate the manna in the wilderness, yet they died. But here is the bread that comes down from heaven, which anyone may eat and not die. I am the living bread that came down from heaven. He who eats this bread will live forever. This bread is my flesh, which I will give for the life of the world. This was such a challenging scripture. Such a challenging word because it was totally against everything physical that they could think of. It was breaking about every law in the Old Testament if you took this literally. You're not supposed to drink the blood. You're not supposed to eat people. And yet Jesus was making a point. Every time it says, eat my flesh and drink my blood, he's basically saying, believe in me, and you will have eternal life. Believe in me, and you will live forever. It says the Jews began to argue after that. You can go through and read it. It says, my flesh is real food and my blood is real drink. If you don't feed on me, you will not live. If you don't love me, if you don't need me, if you don't come to me, if you don't desire me, if you don't worship me, if you don't want to be around me, then you will not have life. And he says it over and over in so many different ways. To feed on Jesus is to truly have faith. And they didn't quite understand it, but they were still thinking something like this. At the end of everything, they came back to this. Is this what you're talking about? No, that's not what he's talking about. They couldn't get it. It was a difficult teaching. In verse 61, it says, aware that his disciples were grumbling about this, Jesus said to them, does this offend you? Then what if you see the Son of Man ascend to where he was before? I mean, do you have to go to heaven to get it? Do you have to see where I came from to be able to understand what I'm talking about? Do you get it? The Spirit gives life. The flesh counts for nothing. The words I have spoken to you are full of spirit and life. Yet there are some of you who do not believe. If we had known from the beginning which of them would believe and would betray him. He went on to say, this is why I told you that no one would come to me unless the Father enabled him. From this time, many of his disciples turned back and no longer followed him. You know, I was really proud of my wife. Recently, she had her 25th spiritual birthday yesterday. And amen. Amen. That was a big accomplishment because many of us have seen many people walk away.
Yeah.
We've seen many hard teachings. Jesus, that was what it was like to be with Jesus. There were some mountaintops and there were some hard teachings. And Jesus followed that up by saying, do you want to leave too? Simon Peter answered, Lord, to whom shall we go? You have the words of eternal life. Amen. We have come to believe and to know that you are the Holy One of God. Amen. And Jesus replied, haven't I chosen you, the 12? Yet one of you is a devil. Sometimes we don't know what Jesus is teaching us. We're confused. And all we can say is, I don't know where I'm going, but I know where I'm not going. I'm not going back. I'm not going back to the world. I'm not going back to my sin. I'm not going back to my old life. I don't know if you've ever been in that position where all you have is where you don't want to go back to the world. And all you can do is hold on to Jesus. You may be closer to him in that very moment than you will ever be in your life. These guys, after this day, were broken down. They were confronted with their lack of faith in the miracles, their lack of faith in Jesus. And now they're confused and they're challenged to the core. And they left that day exactly where Jesus wanted them to be. Totally dependent on him. Totally humbled before him. They had been through an impossible situation with the bread and the fish. And they were challenged to look to Jesus. I hope that you will accept this challenge. They went on a boat ride and had to persevere when they couldn't do it on their own. And I pray that you'll hold on to your faith when you're challenged and feel like you're not going anywhere. And they had a challenging teaching about true faith, to hold on to Jesus above everything else, even when you don't understand. And I pray that today that we're in the same place as Peter. Lord, to whom shall we go? Thank you.